Hey guys, how about a quick little unboxing video? You don't see me do too many of these days because I just don't buy as much as I used to. I've got plenty of projects to last me for many years. However, now and then something pops up that is a good deal or it's something I've been looking for. Ideally both. Now in this case, this is a set that I've got several of, and you've seen me try to restore one, and it's one of the few times that I kind of gave up on it. When I left off, I kind of concluded that there was something wrong with power transformer. Power supply just wasn't working quite right. I taped this out. And it was getting kind of warm, as memory serves. Jeez. What the heck did they do to this thing? Oh, I see. It's like an extra piece of cardboard they put on top. Oh God. Box full of peanuts is what we've got here. Some extra cardboard thrown in for reinforcing. So, that's always a trade-off, because inevitably, when I get a good deal on something, they skimp on the packaging. So it looks like they used a Home Depot box and kind of reinforced it quite a bit. It could be a lot worse. I've seen worse jobs for sure. It's vaguely promising. Alright, so I'll get right to it. It's TV. A small TV. It's an early TV. It's a 7-inch set. It's an Admiral Bakelite 19A11. So I've got a few of them, and I got a 19A12, and it's a black version. However, they've all got issues. Like I said, the one that I tried to restore couldn't quite get to work right and got frustrated. I figured at some point I'd maybe try swapping out the power transformer, but that takes work. The cabinets often have issues. They're cracked, they're chipped, or the screen covers are bad, or the knobs are missing, or the back is missing. It's just always something. And this one's not perfect either, but I'm thinking between this and the ones I've got, plus it was inexpensive, plus for the price I paid, it's worth taking a gamble on the picture tube being good. These are the 7JP4, it's a common 7-inch electrostatic picture tube. They go good, used, tested, proven to have a decent picture. They go for about $100. So, by that, if you can get a whole TV that's got one that's in decent shape for $100 or less, you're ahead of the game. Well, the picture tube is definitely shifted out of place, and I think it's because the mask shifted. Let me get this box out of the way and take a closer look at it. Okay, so they put the whole thing in a plastic bag and put a bunch of packing tape around it. So that's what I meant about the picture tube. Ooh, and the front bashed in. And the whole chassis shifted. Might not have been secured down. That's what happens with TVs. You can put this in quintuple box it, but if the stuff inside the cabinet isn't secured, it's just going to shift around inside all of your padding and it accomplishes nothing. Ideally, when you ship a TV, you take the chassis out and even unmount the picture tube and pack them all individually and ship them. But if the cabinets survived more or less intact, I could be okay with everything else getting destroyed. So it's got some scuffs, minor ones, it's got some scratches, it's got some dirt and debris, but I think it might be damaged. Channel plates are always warped, so it doesn't look too bad. I hate packing tape. Sorry for the bad lighting. It's kind of an overcast day. I'm in our guest bedroom right now. It seemed like a good place to kind of do some triage on this set before I bring it into the basement. So all the knobs are missing. Like I said, it's a very, very rare thing to find one that's got everything. And of course it's got no back. Power cord. Let's take a closer look inside. And honestly, this was very much an impulse purchase, and I was very distracted with work, and I don't really remember if there were detailed photos of the insides or not. I don't think there were. And I knew it was a gamble, and I kind of like to do that when the price is right. You know, knowing that it would maybe make an interesting video. If it's smashed, it's smashed. If it's not, great. And I do believe that this cabinet is unbroken. I mean, yes, definitely some battle scars on it, but I think it's all in one piece. So as far as the safety screen being pushed in, the mask slipping down, and all the rest of it, I can live with all that. So there's the power cord. It's probably not the original. And that, what got me puzzled why I wanted to unmount the camera and get a closer look was this. I don't know what that is. Is that the stump of a transformer that got removed? It's been a while since I worked on one of these. I don't quite remember, but it kind of looks like it was an IF can that got destroyed. Maybe somebody scavenged a part out of it. Well, luckily I've got one or two extra chassis, parts chassis from cabinets that got smashed that I bought cheap. Or I think one or two, I think I might have traded somebody. They were given to me. I don't remember exactly how I ended up with all these, but I got bits and pieces of like half a dozen of these now. And if I just make one good functioning set, I'd be happy. So, looks like everything's intact. If the picture tube's good, this was definitely a great score. I'm happy, like I said, just to get the cabinet, if nothing else. Let's pull the chassis out and take a closer look. So what I'd also like to do is to get one of these actually working to some extent. These are very easy, straightforward to work on, and I think it'd make a good project of doing kind of an incremental restore. Trying a controlled power up and then replacing parts one by one. I think it'd make a really interesting, quick little project. So if all looks pretty much okay underside, that may very well be what I do. I'll have to sort through the chassis I've got. So this one has some corrosion. I don't know what's up with that, but I will choose one of the chassis that I have and see if we can get one of these working, maybe like in, you know, Friday night restoration style. Do it all in one shot and get it working. There were two screws securing the chassis, so I relocated myself down to the basement where I could get some tools. Now I believe it's ready to slide out. And that is one of the appeals of the 7-inch sets in terms of working on them, collecting them, is that, well, they're compact and everything's on one chassis. So slide it out and here you go. You get this up on the workbench and you get the whole thing. So yes, that's not the original power cord, but it's in decent enough shape and can still be used. And there it is. Loose base, real common problem with these. In fact, I bought one, another gamble on eBay. I don't think I showed in a video yet, where somebody had gone to pull this plug out and just ripped the whole back off the socket. And I bought it with just all the loose leads flopping around. Alright, so we got some corrosion, unfortunately. Maybe some critters got in here, left a little bit of dropping here and there. So I think what was there is something like one of these. So that's definitely going to be an issue in terms of restoring it. So I may or may not go with this chassis in terms of doing a quick restoration. Underneath, pretty much looks all original. That is a replacement cap. The rest appear to be originals, which is kind of cool. It's Might make it a candidate for restuffing. Possibly. I like to do it when all the original caps are there and when they've got the original manufacturer's part numbers. Like, I think that's like an Admiral part number on there. It's a mishmash of parts that have been replaced over the years, different manufacturers, or like these plastic ones are essentially impossible to restuff, and I'm kind of less inclined to do it. Get some nice insect goo up there. That kind of got bent down by something. Looks like it kind of got smashed in a little. CRT support. So that thing that got chewed up or missing, that was down there. So definitely somebody didn't unmount it to harvest it. It might have just got busted off because the back was missing from this. Maybe it got whacked and snapped off. Kind of nasty. Otherwise, yeah, it looks like everything's here. Probably sat around unused for many years. A little bit of light surface corrosion here and there. So I've got, I think, 2 others, maybe 3. I think I've got a chassis or 2 out in the garage. I got one of these sets down in the basement with busted up cabinets. I'm going to sort through them and, oh, are you coming to help? Oh, I don't know if you're helping, but thank you. And then I'll see where I want to go from there. I will pick and choose and select one that looks like a good candidate for a good, fun little project. And cabinet-wise, so you can see that mask just completely slipped away, fell apart. But that can all be fixed. Oh, that's kind of curious. So one thing that's a colossal pain in the butt on these is this screen cover is normally held in by speed nuts. Huh. Wow, it reminds me of the Motorola sets with the disintegrating mask. I don't think I've ever found one of these that had a mask quite like that. Huh. Anyways. So there are Bakelite posts molded into the cabinet, and this is put over them, and then there's those like push-on speed nut things that are a nightmare to get off. Because they're made out of spring steel. Well, these. Oh, it's these guys. But they're all gone and the posts aren't broken off. That's remarkable. Man, it's really tough to get them off without breaking off the posts. So I'm glad that they're not there, but now I'm kind of curious, how were they removed so cleanly? Or did this particular set... Oh. I was going to say it didn't have them, but there's one of them stuck to the goo right here. How strange. Well, makes that little task easier. So this can be cleaned up, get a lot more presentable. And I don't know, I think the other sets I have, the gasket's just not there. I don't really know how necessary it is because the picture tube is held very securely to the chassis and you just slide it up behind that. I don't really know why you would need this little extra bit cushioning here. Maybe to make a slightly better seal around the edges? I don't know. Huh. But, well, I certainly don't think I can salvage this. I went hunting and the plan is slowly coming together. So here's the chassis that came with this cabinet. Generally, I like to keep things together as original as possible, like keep the same chassis with the same cabinet, but not always practical. So that is still to be decided. But let me show you what I got. So here's the chassis that came with it. Obviously this transformer is missing or got destroyed. It's got some corrosion. This is not the original picture tube mount and shield. Whether or not it's the original picture tube, I don't know. Probably not. And there are some replaced components underneath. Alright, that much we know. So, I went looking, and first I came up with this. I did some work for a collector in Canada a few years back. And we did some trading, and one of the things I ended up with was this, which is a Canadian version and a later version. So this is a 19A1 chassis, I believe. Well, it was a 19A1-1 or -2 chassis, second run. Dead giveaway right away is a transformer. On the earlier sets, it's like this, kind of a right angle. The later sets are all at a 45-degree offset, like this. They did that to reduce magnetic interference in the picture tube. Now, the very notable thing about this is it's got a ginormous power transformer. That's because it is a 25 hertz, 25 cycle version. I believe it's from the old Niagara power grid. Why am I even mentioning any of this? Well, this is a parts chassis. When I got it, the high voltage coil and box and picture tube had already been scavenged out of it. It's got that transformer I need. So that's why I hang on to these. I knew it would come in handy someday, and lo and behold, here we are. It would be cool to restore that one just because of the transformer. A 25 hertz transformer will work just fine on 50 or 60 hertz. In fact, it'll run cooler. However, it's a lot heavier because it's got a lot more iron in there. So, also, it's essentially corrosion free. So, like, I could swap out the tuner, for example, or I could take parts from this and restore that chassis. Well, anyways, and there's this guy. Same production run as this, and this has the original shield and mount, and then again that earlier style transformer. The cabinet for this has a crack running the entire, or through the entire top, and down into the front it's got some cracks. Don't have the cabinet for this one at all. So yeah, decision time. So I could restore this chassis and put this in the cabinet, but this has some issues too. For some reason, somebody filed down the channel clunker, the inner shaft there, and it's a bit bent. My best guess is that somebody lost the knob, or the knob broke, which often happens with these Admirals because the plastic knob has a tail on it for leverage, and they can snap off. I think somebody filed it down to put a different style knob on it. Again, I could swap some tuners. This has less corrosion on it. So I got some thinking to do. Let me show you briefly what's underneath. Not often you get to compare three original unrestored chassis side by side. And I do have several more, actually. I have a wooden cabinet version that's unrestored. And I do have a couple more of the big light ones in storage. We're going to work with what we got. So another thing different, notice the color of the tuner. That's the color I'm used to seeing in so many Admiral sets and other sets. This tuner was made by, I believe, a company called Standard Tuner or something like that. Notable for the plug-in channel selector modules, one of which is missing here. So those plug-in modules have coils for local oscillator mixer and antenna bypass filter, I think. And then these are dark brown. But, you know, I was talking about restuffing the caps. These are mostly the original caps on all three of these. This one, I think, might be 100% original. But it's slightly different. Well, that giveaway there, it says made in Canada on some of the caps. And they're a bit larger, which I imagine is due to the 25 hertz. You got to do more filtering on the power supply to turn the AC into DC. So this is the one that I just got that I'm thinking about restoring. So some of the caps are missing. Notably, one of the high voltage caps is gone and that black one's in its place. And this one's had some work done. Those two yellow guys down there on the left side, those are not original. I don't think that blue one is either. Or the red. But the high voltage caps are all original. And this is curious because the high voltage caps are bigger, which could serve me well if I decide to restuff them. I'm still on the fence about that. I'll tell you one of the reasons why is some of these Sangmos here, these are plastic, molded plastic. They're two plastic shells that are like heat welded or glued together. You really can't restuff them. These cardboard tube 3-section electrolytic things are a pain to restuff. There's another plastic one that I can't really restuff. Another electrolytic, kind of a pain to restuff. So we're really getting down to what are we restuffing? Just the high voltage caps. And as you'll see in a bit, the high voltage caps I'm thinking about using won't fit in these. They may fit in these, however. So, what to do. And I see this one has some pretty good corrosion on the side there. Well, the top is kind of corrosion free. I'm leaning towards sticking with the original plan and to restore the chassis I just got. Let's try to kind of keep this simple. And I don't think I will restuff it now because I want to try to restore this all in one shot. But I will save all of these caps and I'll kind of tack in the new ones, and I could always swap them out if I choose to. I mean, kind of the only time I like to really restuff is like when I did some Motorola's where every cap was branded Motorola, really nice graphics, and they were all like the same type of cardboard where you could heat up the beeswax and get the insides out. And there's kind of a mishmash of different types of caps and different brands, and it's kind of just a novelty, but it doesn't really do anything for the value of the set. These are relatively common. It's not a surprise that I've got several of them. They're one of the more plentiful sets, especially because the cabinets so often get broken. There's so many extra chassis around. So, all right, plan. I think I will take this picture tube with shield and everything and put it on here and get that back to original. I will take the coil out of this guy, assuming it's the same part number. If not, I'll grab it out of that guy, put it in here, and then we'll go from there. I'll just blow through the schematic real quick. Tuner, it's a standard clunker tuner, just like hey, it looks really similar to this. This is a console TV. Yeah, it is the same kind of tuner. I think it might even be the same model number. 6AG5 RF amp, 6J6 oscillator mixer, that's it, 2 tubes, bam. And here's your IF out. Bunch of 6AU6s, 1, 2, 3 stages of video IF. Let's see. And then this 6AL5 detector, AGC, 6AU6 video amp. And this is a split. Sorry, it's not a split carrier, it's an inner carrier. Most of the sets you see me work on are split carrier, meaning that there are 2 signals right after the tuner, audio and video, and they have separate IFs. But the audio and video go through here, it gets detected, it gets amplified, and this little 2 picofarad cap here picks off the audio at 4.5 megahertz, like more modern TVs all do. Another 6AU6, 6AL5 ratio detector, 6SQ7 audio preamp, and 6AS5 audio output. So that's the top half. That is your tuner and your IF and your audio. Simple as it gets. Bottom half is low voltage power supply, 5Y3, and then a pi filter, choke, 2 filter caps. Bam, there's your B+. Super simple. And I already talked about the high voltage supply. So that video signal also comes down here to the sync separator.
sync amplifier, splits off horizontal and vertical synchronization pulses. And there's this really nifty horizontal oscillator circuit. So nifty that somebody wrote up a paper I will link to describing just how this amazing little circuit works. So with just this minimal amount of components, it looks like it's just half of a triode, a couple transformers, and that's it. That's the whole friggin' horizontal oscillator amplifier. Makes some nice sawtooths at opposite polarities and drives a deflection plates. Really cool. Vertical a little more complicated, but similar deal. Triode, vertical oscillator, and then they use a 6SL7 to do a little phase inversion and make two sawtooths of opposite polarity, and that goes to the vertical deflection plates. And I already mentioned about all the divider resistors here, and then there's a picture tube, and that's it. I decided for this project I would try doing something a little bit different, namely be organized. Typically when I work on a project, I grab a schematic, I get the chassis up on the workbench, I pick a corner and just start working, and I will go back and forth to my parts storage area and grab stuff as I work. I'll grab 2 or 3 capacitors or resistors at a time and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This time I went through the parts list, looked at the chassis, and listed out the stuff I know I'm going to be replacing. And I picked out all the parts I'm going to be using, so I can just sit down and get to it. So, this section is the electrolytics. Now, for those of you not familiar with older electronics, you may be a little put off when you go to look for new parts. Oh, thanks, Shadow. That these aren't available. You go to look for a 4 microfarad cap, a 50 microfarad cap. You're probably not going to find any if you go to Mauser or DigiKey and the usual parts vendors out there. That's because around in the 50s, certainly by the 60s, they changed the numbering scheme, I guess you could say. And I'm not going to get into the details and the history of why, but they had a very good reason for doing it, and it makes sense if you look at the numbers. But back then, they were all like whole numbers, like 1 microfarad, 2 microfarad, 3 microfarad, 30, 50, 20. Now they're 4.7, 33, 47, 22. So, the goal when you do this is to get something close, and it's always okay, at least in electrolytics, to go a little bit higher. In fact, if you look at the old ones and look carefully like at the electrolytic can, they usually say plus 80%, minus 20% for the tolerance. So for this, anything from like 3 microfarad up to around 8 or 9 would be fine. That's not quite right, but something in that ballpark. So what I chose for the 4, for example, is 4.7. For the 30, I went with 33. For the 50, I went with 47. For the 20, I went with 22, and so on. So that's what all these are. They're all rated for 105 degrees Celsius, name brand, good stuff. Voltage-wise, generally you can get these, like 150, 350. They still make these, but I tend to go a little higher, just for some extra overhead. But you know, honestly, like for the 20, I went with a 22 350. This is an Admiral set, and I know that they were pretty conservative with their values. So the voltage on this cap is probably 200 and something. So they designed in some overhead, so I feel pretty confident for that. But generally, if I can, if I've got them handy, I will go a bit higher. So for example, for that 4, I got a 4.7 rated for 200 volts. Because I had it. Alright, so moving on. Oh, so these are just standard plastic film cap. Or these are all the old paper caps. I'm going to be replacing them with plastic film capacitors. And same deal, sometimes you see odd values for back then, like 0.02, 0.022. Would be the next closest equivalent, or for 0.005, go with a 0.0047. Voltage rating, they make all these values in 630 volts. very commonly available. You get 630s across the board for all of these. However, for the larger caps, I did make note of the voltage, because they do start to get kind of big and bulky. Like a 0.22 microfarad 630 volt cap, it's going to be pretty sizable. The original was only 200. So if I have, say, a 400 volt cap, or even 200, I'll go with that. It'll cost less, and it'll be a lot smaller. But for the smaller ones, 630 volts, that's all I even bother to buy. Alright, now to the more interesting things. Okay, so mica capacitors. This does have a few that are rated for 1000 volts. That's tough to find. They don't make mica caps much anymore. They don't use that much anymore. And they're typically made, I think, in 2 or 350 volt and 500 volt. You have to look a while to find 1000 volter, and that's a kind of a sizable cap. And 1300 picofarad is an oddball value. These are used in the horizontal oscillator deflection circuit. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that these are good. I'm pretty sure I don't have replacements other than to scavenge them from another chassis. So I did not pull out any replacements for those. There are also some 6,000 volt caps. If you've never worked on an electrostatic TV before, they all have 5, sometimes 6 capacitors rated for 6,000 volts. Those are for filtering the high voltage supply and coupling signals to the deflection plates. You've really only got one option. ASC makes these really beautiful plastic film caps. And I was lucky and got some rated for 8,000 volts. They also make 10, I think even 12,000. But your standard is 6,000. There's really only one place to get them, Just Radios in Canada. It's an awesome place to really cater to the hobbyist radio, TV enthusiasts. They are about $5 a piece. And you will have to wait a while for the post for them to arrive. Only other place I know of that's kind of got them is Allied Electronics, but they tend to be out of stock, or they have a minimum quantity that's kind of steep. There is two other possibilities these days. Mauser Electronics somewhat recently started carrying these. These are Vima German plastic film capacitors, also rated for 6,000 volts, or 700 volts AC, 6,000 volts DC. They've recently lowered the price even more on these to where they're down to less than $1 a piece. So I picked up a bunch in the thought that I could use them, but immediately there's an issue. These are beautiful because not only are they very high quality caps, but axial, nice long leads. Pop these into the set, no problem. What are you going to do with this? Well, you're going to have to bend over these leads and attach extensions onto them, and then make sure there are no sharp points so you don't get any high voltage leakage. Probably put some spaghetti tubing over them. And if I wanted to restuff the caps, these aren't going to fit. But if you got a bunch of these and you're on a budget, a bunch of sets to restore that is, and you need a bunch of these caps, kind of hard to ignore the price savings there. So I'm going to give them a try. One last thing. Resistors. There is a high voltage resistor divider network. Or I should say there's a high voltage divider network comprised of a bunch of resistors. They used 2-watt resistors back then because resistors do have a voltage rating. Typically a half-watt resistor is good up to, I think, 350, 400 volts, something like that. A 1-watt resistor, 500 volts, and a 2-watt resistor, 750 volts. So you could get a modern 2-watt resistor. Be careful. If you pick the right ones, they are still rated for 750 volts. Or get yourself a bunch of these. These are made by Vichy. These are, I think, called HVR 37s. These are rated for 3.7 thousand volts. They also make VR or HVR 68, which are good for 6.8 thousand volts. These are less than 50 cents a piece. You only need 6 of them. So I just went ahead and picked up a few. They don't have anywhere near 3,000 volts on them, but, you know, why not? Give me a little bit of safety overhead. So, there we go. So when I finally get around to sitting down and working on this set, I got my parts ready to go. Alright, so I was really thinking I could do this all in one video, but I think I chewed up enough time just doing the, you know, unboxing and the backstory and the decisions about what I'm going to do and how the thing works. So I think the second video, hopefully, do it in one shot, do the actual work. So I'm going to clean off the workbench and just focus on this project.